Hey everyone, thanks for taking the time to join our webinar today. Today we're going to be going over great time savers in ConnectSx. So what are some tips and tricks to help you streamline your workflow and save time as you're going about your day in ConnectSx. So while we take a minute to get everyone joined, I'm going to share my screen and go over a few things, uh, kind of bureaucratic things that I like to mention at the top of every webinar. So here we go. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully you are seeing my browser now. So these housekeeping things have to do with just some helpful educational resources that are available to you and the best ways of getting support when you need it. So you can see I switched over my screen to be on our website, connectsx.com, and I want to point out the resources section to you. So under here, we have a ton of great different resources that are available for you to use to answer questions and educate yourself. So first would be the webinar schedule, which hopefully you found if you're here today. So here you can come to see what upcoming webinars we have and watch some of our previous webinars down below. We're going to be updating that again here soon with the webinars that we're going to be hosting the rest of the summer and into the fall. The next thing I'll point out is our knowledge base. Here you can find over 200 articles about how to use ConnectSx. It's a great place to go to educate yourself on our workflows and how to make ConnectSx work for you. It's also a great place to go if you have questions that you need answered and you don't want to reach out for help. But if you do want to reach out for help, maybe you are having a problem, maybe you see something wrong in the system, the best way to get a hold of us is to submit a ticket. So coming here into the resources section and clicking submit a ticket will make sure that our entire support team gets notified that you're having an issue. So rather than emailing one particular person, like your customer success rep or a support person, our entire team will get these emails. So you'll get attended to as fast as possible with our first available person. So this is really the advantageous way of getting a hold of us. Another thing you could do if you feel like sending an email to your customer success rep would be to copy support@connectsx.com. That will also direct your email to them to make sure they're seeing it as well as your customer success representative. And then we can coordinate over on our side, who handles your request. So definitely remember that that's there. These are great resources for getting help when you need it. So for today, like I mentioned, we're going to go over a grab bag of helpful features that should help you save time as you're going through your workflow in ConnectSx. We have a pretty long list just on the agenda that we had posted on the website. There's a good chance we won't get through everything in this hour, which means I'm probably going to be hosting a follow-up webinar, a part 2 of sorts, to cover the remainder and some additional ones that we might add. So if that does occur and we don't get through everything, expect an email with a registration link so you can join that one as well. All right, let's dive in. So the first time saver that I wanted to point out, you've probably heard me talk about it in different emails and webinars before, but this would be duplicating events. So if I go into my event screen here, you can see on each case, there's a button all the way to the right-hand side that says duplicate. You can also go into the case, click on the More menu, and find the duplicate event here as well. And what this does is it launches the ConnectSx case creation workflow, except this time it's called duplicate event, and a lot of the information is already filled out there for you. So all you got to do is enter a name for the case if you want. If you don't enter a name for the case, it'll automatically generate one for you based on the information associated with the case. But I often recommend that people enter their own name to help differentiate one case from another, because, you know, this duplicated event will have the same system generated name as its predecessor. So that is one thing to bear in mind, that these cases would technically have the same name, different event IDs, ID numbers, but the same name unless you decided to change it. So I'll say toboggan. All right, there we go. Um, Otherwise, just enter a date for the case. And if all this still looks good, if we still want to use this preference card, leave it. Otherwise, you can X out the preference card or any of these other details, but just hit create. So really all you would have to do is update the date and hit create. So as long as you are doing a case with the same surgeon at the same facility, at the same procedure, duplicating a case is a great way to save time. And this is one that I would share with your sales reps as well. This probably has the most value to offer to them out in the field as they're creating cases on their phone on the fly. So definitely a good one to remember. All right, our next one would be preference cards, which you just heard me mention as we were copying that case. So I'm going to go to the directory. I'm going to go to the preference cards section. So preference cards are the evolution of what we used to have called inventory request recipes. And what these do is it allows you to store surgeon preferences in the system so that you can reference them easily as you're creating new cases, as you're requesting inventory. So I'm going to create a preference card here. I'll say Dr. Toboggan procedure preferences. And I will select a procedure. So these are going to be associated with a doctor and a procedure. So they could only be used in situations where those procedures and physicians are involved. In terms of when they'd be used in a case, which I'll get to. But you can also use these to create inventory requests. So add any notes about the surgeon preference, like, I'm not sure exactly what you would want to add, but you have a notes field and an additional preferences field. So you can store all of that tribal knowledge that you've been accumulating or that your reps have been accumulating in this preference card so that you have it codified. It's there for anyone who needs to reference it. It's a really great way to store this type of information in ConnectSx rather than just burying it all in notes. So the next step would be to add inventory. So what we're saying here is these are the devices that this doctor always likes to have in a given procedure. So as I come through the inventory selection modal, I can select by product line what devices I need. And I'll just select a few here. And you can modify the quantities. And, it's helpful to think about what the rep will need for the case. Maybe the doctor typically only uses one of these devices, but maybe we want to make sure they have three. Oh, I selected the same one twice. We'll try one other item. There we go. And once you've got all the devices that you need to add to the preference card selected, just hit create. They'll get added to that preference card. And as you can see here, all the items that we're adding here need to have the same manufacturer. So we're selecting under Acme Corp. If you need to make any adjustments, you can still do that right here in the quantity section or remove an item by hitting the red X. But otherwise, we'll hit create and our preference card will be created. So now what do we do with a preference card to help us save time? We've done the work of recording them so people can always come into the preference card section and reference a preference card. You can even copy a preference card just like we did with the case in the previous screen. So let's say you want to take Dr. Toboggan's procedure preferences and modify them a little bit for another procedure. You can duplicate this one, just make any, you have to enter a new name, but make any adjustments to the inventory that you might want and save it again, and you'd have a whole new preference card. So the first thing you'll want to do with the preference card is to assign it to the users that might use it. So I'm going to go to my distributor in the users section, go down to assignments. So this is the type of assignment we do for all of the directory records, to assign facilities, physicians, etc. to our users so that they show up when they're creating a case. But I'm going to select preference card and assign the new preference card to this user. And then it'll be available when they're creating cases and they can add it to the event. All right, so necessary step as you're creating preference cards, don't forget to assign them to your users. But then there are two things you can do with preference cards. And the first would be creating an inventory request. So in this situation, maybe I'm a sales rep, I have a case, I get notified that a case got scheduled, and I know I need inventory that doctor is going to need to do this procedure. So I need to request it. Maybe this is a little outside of the norm. And so I'm going to add the requesting user. So if I was the sales rep filling this out, this would automatically populate. But since I'm in an admin account, I'm going to select the user I'm requesting on behalf of, then select the manufacturer and the preference card. See, this is an optional step. You can always just create the inventory request, but by adding a preference card, some of the work is done for us. So on this select inventory screen, typically I would come through this section and add the containers and loose devices that I want to request. But we can see in the selected tab, we already got inventory added for us from the preference card. So all I have to do now, unless there are additional items that I want to select, is hit next, select the ship to address for the request. So where does it need to go? And then hit create. And that's it. So you're saving all of that inventory selection time by using a preference card to do to create this request. So already, I think this is a really useful feature and a great way to store the surgeon preferences. All right, the next step, or the next thing we can do with the preference card rather, is oh, I'm sorry. I guess I forgot to introduce myself at the top of the call. I think all of you do know me because I know who is on this call. But I am Brendan Sweeney with customer success for customers or ConnectSx. Glad to see you today. But moving on, you can use a preference card in a case as well. So if I were to create a case, I'll just very quickly fill out this info so that we can get to the next screen. And I'll show you how to add a preference card when you're creating a case. So we'll select toboggan, and then you got to select the procedure for the preference card or else it won't show up. So I believe we'll try total knee ortho and see what comes up. But in this next screen where we're selecting our manufacturers, there's a preference card field. And here you can select the preference cards that are available to that user. So adding a preference card to the case means it'll show up in the event once we're done. So another way to add a preference card to a case would be to just go into the event that was already created, scroll down a little bit, and here again we have the preference card section. So to apply a preference card, you just select it in the preference card field, make sure you save. But then what do we do with the preference card? The first thing would be to generate a quote. So we can see that we already have the quote generated because we added that preference card. We can generate this quote into a document that we can share. There we go, download PDF or send as email attachment. We can serve this to the facility before the case so they can reference, what prices and quantities of devices we're anticipating selling in the case. You'll notice that it only functions based on contract price. So you cannot generate a quote for anything that does not have contract pricing loaded. The idea behind that is that the quote is based on the contract that you negotiated with the facility. So you need to make sure that your preference card or your pricing is updated before you do a quote. But you can go in and edit the quote if you need to by adding additional devices, if what's coming from the preference card is not what you need. But let's say that we generated this quote, we gave it to the facility, it came back approved. So I'm going to check the quote as approved. And then when we're marking used inventory, I can use my filters to only show quoted devices. So only show me inventory that was on the quote. So this makes it way easier to save time as we're marking our inventory as used. And it looks like I don't have inventory on that quote. So hold on, let's find another event here. I'll go to this one and we'll add our preference card. Looks like we got it there. I'm looking for a quote with different catalog numbers. So we're going to select a different preference card, like the one we just did. All right. And I'm going to delete the quote so that we can regenerate it with the new preference card. So, all right, here we go. You can create the quote on your own without using a preference card, or you can create the quote from the preference card. So there we go. These are the items that were on my preference card. And you can see even one of them does have a contract price loaded. So that's what that would look like on the quote. And when we are going to mark the used inventory, there we can quote, or we can filter by the quoted catalog numbers. There we go. And just select them as normal. Again, they would need to be in the user's custody in order to be selected. So that's a key. That's the reason that requesting inventory with a preference card is a good step to complete before using the preference card in a case, is you make sure that all of that inventory has been sent to the rep and is there ready for the case when they go to use the preference card. But they would just mark the inventory as used as they normally would and finish out the case as planned. So essentially, the preference card allows you to store certain inventory choices by surgeon and procedure. Then request inventory based on that preference card, and then filter your inventory based on the quote generated using that preference card. So if you have all that set up, it will save the rep a lot of time selecting inventory at each stage of that process. And as we saw in this example, potentially getting to the stage of marking inventory as used and not having the inventory that they need to fulfill those surgeons' preferences. So it's a good thing to keep up to date and to use in practice. All right, so our next stop on the time savers agenda is to look at some good ways of selecting and searching for inventory. You've also probably heard me talk about this one quite a bit, but it's using the scan barcode feature. So here in the all inventory screen, I'm going to go to my filters, and anytime you see this little icon here means you can scan a barcode to use that search field. So if I hit that, then I scan my barcode, you can see it reads the barcode and populates it with the exact text stored in that barcode. And then hitting apply will search the inventory using that barcode data. So I have 4 devices that match. It worked. So it's useful just for searching, but even more useful when you're in an event and you use that option. So I'm going to go into a case and I'm going to mark inventory as used. And you can see here on both of these windows or fields rather, we can scan a barcode to return inventory. There we go. And it searched my inventory for me and returned those 4 devices that we were just looking at. So now I'm free to select it and it gets added to my selected tab just like that. But what if I want to do even less work? I'm going to delete my search there so we can try this again. This would be using the scan to add feature. Now, again, for the scan to add to work, the barcode data needs to be stored correctly in the inventory. So the exact barcode data that's stored in the barcode would need to be stored in the UDI or the barcode field for those devices so that it can read the barcode and search for the exact data to return the inventory. And then beyond that, the rep would need to make sure that they have the inventory in their custody in order for this to work. So the scan to add feature allows us to just scan the barcode and then it'll automatically get added to the case. There we go. So you can see I just got that one successfully added. So I'm going to X this out. We'll go back over to the selected tab. There it is. If I want to add more, I can do that here. If I did scan to add again for this same barcode, it would increment. So each scan corresponds to 1 device being added. So if you have a rep that prefers scanning barcodes, they can just scan for all the devices that they just used. And as long as the UDIs match and the inventory is in their custody, it'll just get added to the case just like that. So again, with the caveat that the data needs to be set up correctly and they need to have the inventory, this is probably one of the most seamless ways to add inventory to a case. So that's why we covered it here. Mark is used just like that. All right, so one more stop when we're talking about scan to add, and that's when you're doing a request or a transfer. So I'm going to build a transfer real quick. We'll transfer from the org to a distributor. And we're looking at basically the same window we were just looking at when we were marking used inventory. So we can, again, search using the scan barcode, or we can scan to add here. There we go. Oh, but it's not finding any matches. So that means that the inventory is no longer in custody. So we might have used the inventory in the case, which would mean it's no longer available for transfer, or the custody that I selected was just incorrect. So how about we try instead going from the distributor that we were just using to the organization. We'll see if this inventory is in that user's custody. Oh, no match found. Okay, so it seems like we used all that inventory in the previous case, which is a bummer because I can't add it here. But the scan to add feature works just the same. If you're using it in a transfer or a request, you just select the item using the scan to add, and it would get added here in the selected window. So scan to add, again, a great time saver. The next stop, similar to a preference card, is going to be bills of materials. So similar to a preference card, this is kind of building a template that you can use at a later date to select inventory for a particular purpose, which for this would be stocking a tray. So all of these bills of materials you can think of as kind of container templates or a recipe for what should go in a container in order to call it complete. So if you want to create a bill of materials, you just click on the plus button in the upper right, give the bill of materials a name, and then select the items that need to be on that bill of materials. So here I'm saying these are the devices that need to go in this tray or any tray that this BOM gets associated with. And you can then add minimum and maximum quantities. These are more just general guidelines for your users as they're selecting inventory to stock the tray with. The required quantity is what our system will use when directing inventory selection. So the required quantity is the only systematic quantity that we're entering here. The others are just more guidelines. And once you select all the inventory that you want to be part of this container, you just hit create, and then your BOM will get added. Looks like I need a different name. There we go. So we have all of our devices. You can see this one's outlined in red because only 2 containers are possible. This is telling me how many containers I could possibly build with the inventory that's in custody currently. And also what containers are assigned to this BOM. So there's some useful information on the detail screen for a BOM after it's created. But in terms of saving time, which is why we're here, you would then go take this BOM and assign it to a container. So I'm going to go to my inventory. I'm going to filter for containers. And I have a new container I created just for this purpose. So it has no inventory in it, 0 devices. So we would need to build this tray from scratch, which if you can imagine, you would go and add devices. You're probably looking at a spreadsheet and you're copying and pasting catalog numbers. You're looking up the lot numbers. You're doing that repeatedly to make sure you get the appropriate quantities. It can get to be really cumbersome work. So it might be valuable to your users to only do that once. And that would be when they're creating the BOM. To save time using that BOM, then we go to the bill of materials section or the field up at the top and add the bill of materials. So I'm going to select my BOM. The page just saved automatically for me. And now if I scroll back down to the bill of materials section, I can see the BOM displayed here, showing me what is required by the BOM versus what is actually in the container. And then you can use these buttons to fix shortages. So essentially what that means is going into inventory and selecting devices to populate the quantity that is required in the BOM. Using the fix shortages button is useful when you're trying to select specific lots. So let's say the container was already stocked. And you are trying to select the appropriate lot numbers to match what devices they added to the tray. You would want to use the fixed shortages because then you can search for the specific lots that you need. But if we are just stocking the tray for the first time, which, like I mentioned, can be probably the most cumbersome part of the process, we have this great auto refill all button. So I'm going to hit that. I'm going to select first in, first out, which will select my oldest inventory first. If for some reason I want to select my newest inventory, to make this a brand spanking new container, I can select last in, first out, and the system will use that method based on when the inventory was created. And then hit run, and the system will go through and populate the inventory for us. So I can see here that three out of 3 items and 1 out of 1 items were already fulfilled for me there, but we don't have any of this item in custody. So in this instance, I would need to probably dig in and understand what's going on there. I probably need to create some new inventory, but I probably would want to check if that matches reality. So do we actually have none in the warehouse, or are there just none in the system? Um, if we really have none, why didn't this get reordered? Or is this item discontinued? Any number of exceptions that might apply, but this is telling me that I need to go dig into that situation there. But what I can do then is export a pick list. So the system went through and added the devices for me. I can see now in the bill of materials section that 3 out of 3 items have been fulfilled, 1 out of 1, and 0 out of 5. Um, on that item, like I mentioned, I need to go either add more inventory so I can fulfill this, or maybe it's the wrong item to be on the BOM and it needs to be updated, whatever the situation is, to resolve that inventory shortage. But if we scroll down further, we can see the devices that were selected and they're given lot numbers and UDIs. So we just populated the container in the system. Now someone needs to go physically pick these devices and add them to the tray for that tray to be considered stocked and ready to be shipped out. So what I just did in the previous screen was click generate pick list, and it downloaded here. There we go. And I'm going to share my screen. And here we can see we have a spreadsheet of the items that need to be picked. So I can send this to my warehouse and they can go look for these catalog numbers in these lots of these quantities. So it's a really useful way for stocking trays or replenishing a tray, to just go to the BOM and see what the shortages are, fill the shortages, and then generate that pick list so that the users can then go, or my warehouse operatives can go pull that inventory and stock the rest of the tray for me. And this is also, in both of these situations, preference cards and BOMs, really useful ways of maintaining what I like to call a source of truth. So these are the surgeon preferences for the whole company. Everyone can see that that doctor and that procedure have these preferences, or bill of materials. These containers need to be stocked this way with these devices in these quantities. And it's useful, like you can see the name here on this container is custom container 32. It's useful to use the bill of materials actually to manage custom sets according to surgeon preference. So, if that surgeon requires a few extra devices than the container typically holds, maybe you build a bill of materials to match that specific situation. So anytime that a container is going to be sent to that surgeon, they can just switch out the bill of materials, remove the one that's on there, and then add the one corresponding to that surgeon's preference. So yeah, here's a custom BOM for Dr. Sweeney. Then we scroll down to the bill of materials section, and as we can see, it's changed. There is actually totally different inventory here. But again, I just hit the auto refill all button. The system will attempt to fill it for me. Looks like it did a great job. And I can export the pick list to give to my warehouse to go do that then. It is worth noting that because we just changed this container from one BOM to another, and it totally changed what inventory it's saying should be in there, that we now have 2 catalog numbers that don't belong. Maybe that's okay. Maybe we don't care. But maybe we need to come remove the items that don't belong in the BOM that have this status. So I can select those and hit release selected, and then it should match the bill of materials perfectly. So only the 4 devices that we need from the BOM, all is right in the world. So it's that easy to manage these things in the system. to change one bomb, one container from one bomb configuration to another. It's that simple. Of course, then someone needs to go do it in reality. And that's where generating that device list or that pick list comes in. All right. So let's see here. One more thing to mention with bills of materials is that you can also duplicate a bill of materials. So we've talked about duplicating cases. We've talked about duplicating preference cards. And just like that, you can duplicate a bill of materials. So remember this option when you are creating like custom BOMs for a given surgeon. You know, in that situation, you probably are taking an existing container or an existing set and saying, I need a few more of this or a few more of that. So you could take the BOM that already exists for that tray, copy it, and then just make the adjustments and call it, Dr. Brendan's custom bill of materials. So another great thing to do here, duplicate that BOM and you don't need to go through selecting all the inventory again. Oh, okay. Sorry, I had a question. I want to make sure I don't miss that. So if you need to edit a BOM, so let's say this BOM has existed for quite a long time and we created a new item that needs to be added to the BOM, or maybe an item got refreshed, has a new catalog number. So we need to remove what's there and add the new one. Just go into the bill of materials section, open up that BOM, and then any of these fields here, you can, like the name, for instance, you can modify. Just make sure you hit save. But then you essentially just make your changes and then save. So if I need to remove an item like this red one, I just hit the red X. I can add the next catalog number by searching for it here. If I need to change the required quantity, I just go ahead and make that change. I can enter quantities in any of these areas as long as I hit save. Oh, my min and max quantities are off. Oh, my minimum can't be different than the required. It's helpful. There we go. All right, so just made that change and saved it. So now my BOM is updated. It is worth noting that if you are going to make adjustments to BOMs like this, you should go and look and see if it's assigned to any containers. Because that means that any containers it's assigned to will likely be out of sync with the BOM now it's been changed. So you would need to go into each of those containers in the inventory section, go down to their bill of materials area and make any adjustments that you need to make them compliant with the new bill of materials structure. All right. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or in the Q&A area, and I'll get a notification. Thank you for asking that question. But my next stop will be distributor shared inventory. So as you're all aware, I'm sure, if you're here on this webinar, ConnectSx is governed by inventory custody. So when we do inventory movements, it's moving from one custodian to another. And that kind of represents who's accountable for the inventory, right? But that doesn't always make sense, for the situation on the ground. And the situation that I'm talking about is the concept of a distributorship where inventory is shared. Maybe there's a shared warehouse where reps go in and pull the inventory that they need for that day or for that case. Maybe inventory is exchanged freely in the field. So reps meet up, trade inventory that they might need for their next case, ends up in the trunk. They go get it sterilized and do their case, return whatever is left. A lot of these movements are happening quickly on the fly. and you don't have time to slow down and do inventory transfers just to move it from the distributor to the sales rep or from one sales rep to another sales rep. So how do we help out with that and not just saddle our sales reps and our distributors with a bunch of unnecessary inventory movement and transfers that they need to do? And the answer to that question is by setting up distributor shared inventory. So if I go into the users section and click on my distributor, I'm going to scroll down to the assign users area. And here I can see my distributor has 3 users assigned. Right above that, we have the option to turn on access to distributors inventory. And what this will do is it'll allow these 3 sales reps to see and to take action on or use the inventory in the distributor's custody. So if you set this up and you turn on this feature, what you probably want to do, the best way to manage inventory going to these users after that would be to only transfer inventory to the distributor. That way they build a big pool of inventory and their reps can pull from it as they need. It will be visible to them, it'll be available to use, and they won't have to do transfers in order to do that. So we have the shared inventory turned on. So I'm going to log out and log in as a sales rep so we can see what that looks like. There we go. All right, so now I'm viewing ConnectSx as a sales rep. I'm going to go to inventory. And here we can see in the custody section, almost everything I'm seeing belongs to the distributor. So what if I want to see inventory that belongs just to me? I'm just going to go ahead and click on the custody column. And it'll filter and pull all of the inventory that's in my custody to the top. So that would be the best way, I'd say, to just pull up the inventory that belongs to a rep versus what's shared with the larger distributorship, is to up and down filter this column. But the real value and also something to watch out for comes in when you're marking inventory in a case. So I'm a rep, I'm in this case, and I'm marking inventory as used. You can see if I hit search here, my inventory is going to populate with the inventory in only this rep's custody, which looks like nothing available in this situation is showing up. But I will want to change this filter to be inventory in the rep and all inventory shared by the distributor. So definitely important to coach your reps to change this filter here, the custodian filter, to include the distributor inventory, or else they're not going to see any of it show up here. So you can see the custody is highlighted in red because it's different than this user's name, but you can select it and mark it as used. Now, the reason I'm not seeing more inventory, in the previous screen, we had seen a lot there, is because this case was created using a different manufacturer. So again, it would need to be inventory associated with the right manufacturer to show up in this case. That's why I'm seeing this device here. So even though it's in the distributor's custody, that custody is shared. So as a rep, I can select that device and add it to the case. So this is a big one to remember as you're setting up your distributor groups, because it's not just saving them time, it's saving them work. They won't have to create transfers every time they need to move inventory from one person to another. They only have to deal with transfers when they're exchanging inventory with the organization admin, or the home office rather. So good one to remember. And also it'll probably make your sales reps happy because they won't have to do all that extra legwork to move the inventory around. All right. So my next section I want to stop by and talk about is contact info. I know this might sound boring, but it is absolutely critical. Really, what keeps the wheels of this industry turning is, sending the billing documents back and forth, sending shipments back and forth, um, communicating what inventory was used, when a case is going to happen. All this kind of stuff only happens if our contact info is correct. And judging just from my own personal experience, uh, everyone's got multiple email addresses. People are, switching what companies they work for. They're moving. They're switching phone numbers. There's a lot of contact info flying around, and it might be stored in my contacts, but maybe it's not stored in my partner's contacts. Um, the point is, it's messy, and there's a lot of info to keep track of. I would like to propose that we use ConnectSx as the source of truth for that contact info. And we can do that in a couple ways. So first, I'm going to switch back to my admin view. And from here, I'm going to go to settings, where first I can see my contact info. So this is the info for my account that other users in the account will see. So the shipping address for my personal info. I want to make sure this is updated. I want to make sure all my information is updated. Also encourage your reps and your users to do the same. They can log in and see their personal contact info and make updates if they need to. That'll be the first line of defense in keeping this information up to date, is just all of us doing it ourselves. Um, then the next tab in settings would be the organization tab. Hopefully this is already populated, but if it's not, make sure all of your organization's information is in here and is correct. No need, I think I don't even need to say how critical it is. It'll go on your billing documents. Everyone in the company will see it. So that all needs to be right. Beyond that, going into the user section. And you probably did a little bit of this when you set your users up, or maybe they did when they claimed their account. But in each user screen, there's contact information. We have phone number, we have alternate email address. So this is a good one to remember because while the account was created using one email address, you can, when you're sending documents, so maybe I'm sending a sales order from inside the system, I can select this alternate email address as well. It'll show up in the drop-down menu there for me. So, maybe my user prefers to get their sales orders emailed to a different email address. So that's an option that you have. Going down even further, each user has a shipping address. So you want to make sure this is up to date, because this is what you select when you're creating transfers. So that would go on the transfer pick list. It would show up there as well. So, and I believe also in request documents, and potentially on certain documents related to the case, but I'd have to check to be sure. But the point is, make sure this contact info is up to date if you want shipments and documents to go to the right address. And then if we look a little bit further down, you can add additional contacts. So, maybe this user has multiple warehouses. Maybe this user prefers to get certain shipments shipped to their mother's house because they're there all the time. You have no idea. But the point is, if you need to add additional contacts, you can do that here. So you can manage multiple pieces of information. You can even store, we don't have a street address section here, but you could store it in the contact name if you really need to. So use these fields here flexibly to store the information that you need to store, because then they can come in here and reference it at a later time. They can select it when they're doing a transfer, or if we're going to share in a document via email, that email will be stored here in the system. So if you need to create even more additional contacts, you can do that by clicking the plus button below. All right, so user contact information and shipping addresses, very important. I included it in time savers because of a couple of reasons. Heading this type of problem off at the pass, not having the contact information correct, is going to save you tons and tons of time down the line. I am seeing a couple questions. I'll get to those in just a sec. The other reason I bring it up is, like I mentioned, because you actually do select user emails when you're sending documents from inside the system. So you want to make sure they're stored and that they're correct in here. Okay, so I'm checking out the questions here. How do we update info email addresses when they change? Okay, so if I'm reading that correctly, I think what is being asked here is how do we change the email address on an account? Because obviously, like we just looked at, you can add additional email addresses in the additional contact section or in the alternate email section. But interesting question. Yeah, you create a user account using a particular email address. And what if that email address changes? Or what if it was entered incorrectly? That is a little bit of a sticking point because this is such a protected piece of information. This is not something that we allow to be changed willy-nilly because it's used for logins. It's also used to associate all of the rest of the data in ConnectSx with this user. So it's a very critical piece of information, and it's not something that we take lightly to change. So if you have this issue, reach out to support. There's a potential that we could help you change it, but it does involve touching the data in the database, which is highly risky. Anytime you touch the database for a system, you risk damaging the data in it. So even though we're only changing the email address, it might have further reaching implications. So we really don't like to do that. What I would say as the best case options to dealing with that situation is to deactivate the user, get rid of them, and create a new user account for them with the correct email address. So I also see that question here. The next question was how to remove a contact because then they are no longer in the position. You can go into a user account. Yeah, here, I'll do this test one. And then in the upper right, you can hit the deactivate user button. This will make it so that this user can no longer log in. We can no longer do cases with their account. They can no longer be in transfers. However, if we ever need to come back and reactivate them, we can in the same user screen, essentially almost clicking the same button. You just click the green button here to reactivate them. But yeah, I would recommend deactivating the user and then creating a new user using the add users section. And then using the corrected email address that way. If there are further extenuating circumstances, reach out to support and we'll see what we can do to help. All right. So that is user contact information. The last piece I want to show before we're out of time, we only have 4 minutes left. And I'll go a little bit over time if there are additional questions. Feel free to drop them in the Q&A or in the chat. I know I'm going right up to time here. But the last piece I want to talk about is facility contact info, and the same would pertain to physician contact info, actually. But facility contact info is way more important because it's involved in the billing process. So under the directory, under facilities, you can click on a facility to open up its detail screen and make sure that its address is in here correctly so that when billing documents need to be sent, they go to the right place. And then that address is available to be selected when you need to. Another piece here that is, I would say, even more critical is the billing contact. This is who will show up when inventory or when a sales order needs to be sent. This is the default. Um, and this is how you know and how your users know where the billing documents need to be sent. So where sales orders need to be sent and where invoices need to be sent. The billing contact is the critical piece there. And if you need to add additional contacts to a facility, you can do that down below. And those can also be selected when you're sending an email attachment. Their email address will be available in that section. And also, this kind of serves as a little address book almost for that facility of all the contacts that you need to manage there. Thank you. Someone just gave a compliment. So I appreciate that. I will be sending out a part 2 registration email. So keep an eye out for that. And we will be going through even more time savers at that future date. So yeah, just to sum up my previous comment related to contact info, it seems bureaucratic and probably seems boring, but if you can just stick with me here and imagine the pain that you will be in when a case isn't getting billed for because it got sent to the wrong email address, or when your user needs to get a shipment and the shipment got sent to the wrong place because the wrong address was stored. This is a situation where that time directly correlates to money. And taking care of this stuff up front, doing the manual, painful pick and shovel work of updating your contacts and contact information will make sure that things happen smoothly down the line and you don't have to run into those painful situations. So that's why it was included in our time savers section here. Just an opportunity for me to talk about some boring stuff that I know no one wants to hear about, but is critically important. So that is about half the agenda I had for today. So like I mentioned, we will be doing a part 2 webinar. And I might even add some additional things to that agenda. So keep an eye out for a registration email for that. And hopefully you learned something today, or at least I reminded you of something that would be useful. Feel free to drop us a line if you want to see something in particular show up in a webinar in the future, or if you have feedback for me. I know I didn't introduce myself at the top. Sorry about that. But I'm always looking for feedback on how to make these webinars better. And how to make them really tailored to suit your needs. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.